Ambassador Markarova, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Between losses of electricity and water, continued combat, Russian rocket attacks on Ukrainian cities, it's going to be a very daunting winter for your country. Can Ukraine continue to fight if the country's infrastructure comes under continued sustained attack from Russia?
Well, Ukraine will not surrender and will fight until we win. We have been saying that before this attack happened. We have been saying it during the past 8 years of this war, because the war started in 2014. And during this very difficult 8 months, we have been saying that when the rockets fell on our cities, when Russians were as close as at the suburbs of Kiev, when they occupied a number of cities, when we discovered the atrocities, and even now, when, as you said, and we saw the last updates from Ukraine, almost 50% of our energy infrastructure is destroyed. But people are very resolute that we want to be free. We want to live in a free, democratic Ukraine, even without lights and water as we have right now, but not under the occupation. So we will fight, and we really hope that the global coalition that is with us today will also stay the course until we win.
How important is American support, both material and political, to Ukraine's fight for independence?
It's essential, crucial, all of these words, you know. We wouldn't be able to do it without our strategic friend number one, as we call the United States. Since even before this renewed aggression in February, the US has been supporting us since 2014 on different areas, in financial budget support, in helping us to build our defense capabilities. We just signed our new strategic partnership charter in November 2021, and we had really large plans which already started to implement. Now, since February, it's very difficult to not to see the support that the US has been providing to us. From a very strong political support, we have heard President Biden and Congress on a very strong bipartisan basis very clearly on where the US is. US is with Ukraine as long as it takes. This is what we wanted to hear, but we didn't only hear it. We saw already 3 supplementary budgets, with US allocating unprecedented amount of support, both again for security assistance, for budget assistance, for humanitarian assistance. Now in this new crisis with the energy, the US is working day and night with us on how to help us with that. And more, even more than just helping us bilaterally, US has organized other partners to help us. So the Ramstein group, you know, with more than 50 now countries joining US and meeting on a regular basis. Just 2 days ago, there was a 7th Ramstein meeting on the security system. There is the energy platform and other ways of cooperating. So we are really grateful to everyone in the US, from president to American people.
But do you feel frustrated by some constraints placed on aid that Americans feel run the risk of escalating the conflict with Russia?
We don't have the luxury of feeling frustration. It's all a task for us. So, you know, we are very grateful for everything we are receiving, and we need more. And this is a task for president, for diplomats, for everyone, to supply our brave defenders on the front line with everything they need. So if we are not getting something, we just view it as, you know, a job to be done, to convince our partners, to discuss, to find whether something can be provided. You know, just think about December. In last December, people were saying that we will never get Stingers or Javelins. In February, people were saying that HIMARS probably is not going to be feasible, or the NATO 155 caliber. So I'm positive that, you know, as situation evolve, as we are showing that we are capable not only of liberating our territories, but we are capable of winning, as we see more and more countries joining this coalition of the willing to fight together with us, not fight on the battlefield, but you know, help us to fight this fight. I'm positive that you know, all of our friends, including the US, will be able to provide us with everything we need.
I want to hear your reaction to recent political developments in this country over aid to Ukraine. Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, who's going to be, it would seem, most likely going to be the new Speaker of the House, has warned, in his words, no blank check for Ukraine when there's a Republican House majority. There was a poll in the Wall Street Journal that showed a steep decline among Republican voters in their support of aid to Ukraine. And there were some commercials by a political action committee run by a man close to Donald Trump, which said, America's in terrible shape, the economy is awful, and Joe Biden's giving $66 billion to Ukraine. He shouldn't be doing that. First, are you concerned about Ukraine becoming a partisan cause in the US, or are you confident that there's more smoke than fire here? And second, what do you say to an American taxpayer who asks, what's in it? Why are my dollars going to Ukraine?
Thank you. Excellent question. Like two parts of that question.
Yes.
First, whether we are concerned. We have very strong bipartisan support, and it's not just words. We really have it. And we feel that the support of American people, and as you saw, the recent poll has shown that more than 70% of Americans, when asked whether the US should be supporting Ukraine, said yes. So it's very bipartisan from the people of this country. And we also, during this previous 8 months, we saw very strong bipartisan support in Congress for every initiative, whether it's the supplementary budgets or the strong position of Congress and Senate to recognize Russia as the state sponsor of terrorism, or supporting other initiatives that has to do with Ukraine. And I think we have reasons to believe that we will have that same strong bipartisan support going forward. So when we hear people, Leader McCarthy, future leader, talking about the no blank checks for Ukraine, but Ukraine never asked for blank checks. We always tell why and what we need. We always report. And I think it leads to this, your second question, why US has to help us? Why is it in actually American interest for Ukraine to win? Well, first, because we are fighting for the same values and principles on which this great country is built. Freedom, democracy, sovereignty, the ability of people to live like they want to live, the ability of people to choose their own government and change their government on a regular basis. This is what we like, and this is what we believe in Ukraine. And this is the reason why Russia attacked us, because this is so different from autocratic regime that we see in Russia. The second reason is, we have to listen to what Putin says, the war criminal Putin. It's not only about Ukraine. He would like to restore the Russian Empire, which means that, and he openly threatens not only Ukraine, which he already attacked, but he also threatens other countries. He threatens Poland, he threatens Baltic states, he threatens other countries in Europe. And I also want to remind that he already attacked us before, he already attacked Georgia before, he already attacked Moldova before, he already did 2 wars on Chechnya, which wanted to be independent as well. He shot down MH17, and we just saw the ruling of the court recently. And he poisoned people on the streets of London. So if we do not stop together Putin while it's still in Ukraine, we will have to stop him elsewhere. And it's very important for everyone, and especially for the United States, as a country that believes in democracy, to show that democracies not only deliver better to their people, that's we know. We see how people in democracies live, even though it's difficult. You have to work, you have to, but we also have to show that democracies can defend themselves from the autocrats like Putin, because if Putin wins in Ukraine, it's not only going to be a bad message for democracies, it's going to be such a strong reinforcement for all the autocrats who are thinking to redirect, to change the borders around them through force.
So what you're saying is what's at stake in Ukraine is more than Ukraine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there is a third very pragmatic reason, especially for taxpayers. If Putin is successful in Ukraine, if Ukraine falls and he attacks one of the NATO countries, then because of the Article 5, everyone, including the United States, will have to defend the members of the NATO countries, not only with the military support, which is going to be even more expensive than the amount of money which is provided to Ukraine, but also with people on the ground. We do not request the boots on the ground. We still have lines of Ukrainians who are ready to go to the armed forces and to defend our own country. So that's why I think, I feel the support from the American people, and it's the right thing to do also. And this is what I keep saying when we ask for the support.
What do you say in response to General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who said the other day that while Ukrainian gains have been remarkable in defending the country against Russia, there still remain many Russian troops on Ukrainian soil, and likely that the Ukrainian army will be able to gain that much ground. Therefore, maybe the winter is a time to test the possibility of negotiations. Is there anything there?
Well, first, General Milley has been such a great support. He is, and he works constantly with our Chod, Zaluzhny, and he has been instrumental in helping us in this fight. And I know he knows that we will keep fighting, and we will continue to liberate our cities, whether it's summer or winter. The reason why we need to do it is because we know what happens on the occupied territories to our people. We have seen atrocities in Bucha, whole world seen atrocities in Izium, but what we see in Kherson is even worse. The torture chambers, thousands of people who on a daily basis are being tortured, killed by Russians. We cannot let our people behind, so we need to liberate our territory all within internationally recognized borders as soon as possible. I'm positive Russia wants an operational pause, as the military people say it, but we are defending our homes and our loved ones. As long as we will have something to fight with, we will continue fighting.
I mean, it would be very surprising if, in fact, Ukrainian forces were to actually mount an offensive during the winter months. Are you saying that's not something unlikely?
Look, we cannot stop even for one day. Again, it's our brothers and sisters, it's our children who have been stolen to Russia from the uncontrolled territories. Every day matters. So, of course, we are trying to do it in a very smart way. Of course, unlike Russians, our president and our commander-in-chief values every Ukrainian life. So we will not be doing, offensives without planning carefully them. Of course, we, unlike Russians, also care about people who are there on the occupied territories. That's why we were so careful about liberating Kherson. We couldn't take the city by force because there were our people there. So, but we will keep liberating Ukraine. This is
how do you think this war ends? By the way, do you think it ends with Ukrainian troops pushing Russia out of off Ukrainian soil, with the Russians sustaining so many losses, or facing opposition at home that they give up? How does it end?
Well, we went through a very difficult process since 2014-15, when Ukraine was forced to enter into Minsk Accords, which were not very fair, I would say, to Ukraine, but nevertheless, as a very law-abiding country, we decided to stick with them, and we implemented them while Russia was violating them all the time. And
because the Accords acknowledged the Russian presence on Ukrainian soil, that was the way in which it was, you're saying, was unfair to Ukraine.
Well, because, because Crimea is no different than any other place in Ukraine. And if we had the support that we have right now from all of our partners, and if we could fight, we would have done it in 2014 and 15. But I want to remind you, Russia attacked us just months after President Yanukovych, together with his clique, fled the country and robbed the country blind 5 years before that. So we were not really in a position to fight the fight with Russia. Whereas now the situation is different. After 8 years of reform, after 8 years of building the country, and with all the international support now, and our armed forces were ready to do what the president decided to do on the 24th of February. So, but how does it end? Nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. Nobody used all venues to use the diplomatic solution in order to restore our territorial integrity. But right now, when Russia is attacking us, we can only respond with force. So we will fight until we liberate all of our country within internationally recognized bodies. So the victory, the just victory for us, is return of our territories, return of our people, and justice. We want to see everyone, we want to see accountability for what they have done.
I want to ask you a little bit about yourself. First, you're the winner of the Women in Power Award. What particular challenges, if any, face women in power when women are ambassadors?
Well, I'm not a career diplomat. I'm a financier, and I used to work in private sector, and then was a minister of finance. And then I thought I was going back to a comfortable life in private business when the president asked me to serve again in this position. Being diplomat is a very difficult work, not regardless of gender, because it's a true 24/7 job. And it's a 24/7 job, not only for you, but for your family, for the entire family. And whatever you do, everywhere you go, for your children and for your spouse, you have to serve. I think it's also very challenging for women, because you have to have strong support from your partner and from everyone in the household. You have to be able to move. You have to be able to be out there all the time. And it's a huge honor, of course, to be ambassador of your country, but it's a huge responsibility too, especially in times like this, in times of war, when you know that everything you do, so many lives depend on you. And it's not just a figure of speech, it's not every mistake that you can make will result in lives being lost or not. So it's a huge pressure. And I think, we should have more women in these positions, because I think naturally women are good negotiators, and they're trying to find a diplomatic solution rather than a solution with force. I don't want to be stereotyping, but and I see more and more women in this position. I'm so happy that in Washington now, the more ambassadors we have coming, so many of them are women. So it's challenging, but it's also very honorable. And
when you were born, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, and you were coming of age as the USSR was coming apart. I'm just curious for yourself, for ordinary people in Kyiv or in other Ukrainian cities, what's been the big difference between life before and after the breakup of the USSR and Ukraine's emergence as an independent country?
Well, I'm the last generation, as I always say, born under occupation. So I was in high school when Soviet Union finally collapsed, and it's of course difficult to analyze now, but it's such a big difference from knowing that you live in your own country, and that you're free to say what you want to say, and that everything that you heard parents talking in the kitchen, but which was not allowed to be said in school.
Yes.
And to be able to learn not two histories of your country, the true history which your parents tell you, and the politicized false history which the Soviet teachers teach you in school. So these double standards, which have been so obvious even for children in the Soviet Union, especially in Ukraine, because again, Ukraine, we knew like whispers about Holodomor, the genocide of 1932-33. There were whispers about persecution of Jewish people in Ukraine. There were whispers. I mean, we saw it, we lived it, we saw it around us. And yet, on the in school and everywhere, we only heard lies how everyone is happy in the Soviet Union. And even in late 80s, there were still people prosecuted in Ukraine for just being Ukrainians, for speaking Ukrainian, for fighting, to organize Ukrainian unions, or, you know, even to say that something about the true history of Ukraine. So it was difficult, of course, you know, the first couple of years after the breakup of the Soviet Union, the economic situation was horrible, you know, and I remember that. I remember the lines in the stores. I remember the shortage of food, which is, again, unbelievable for Ukraine, the country that has been called the breadbasket of Europe. But through all that difficulty, I think the prevailing feeling was we are free at last.
Between those economic hard times when Ukraine was first independent, and then the very complex political ups and downs and ins and outs of leadership in Kyiv, given the contentious politics of the place, did you always have confidence in Ukraine finding its way, or were there times when you when you doubted that independence could succeed?
You know, so many generations of Ukrainians dreamt about it, worked so hard to get to that moment, and sacrificed so much to get to that moment that, frankly, I was born in a mixed family, and you know, I'm half Ukrainian, half Armenian, and but I never had doubts that Ukraine will succeed. So in Ukraine, I mean, we have to understand that, again, 400 years of occupation, we were able to preserve the culture, preserve language, preserve you know, us as a separate nation, and that's what we knew how to do. You know, we knew how to persevere, we knew how to survive, and we also knew how to fight. So freedom and the willingness to fight for it was very important for us. Now, on the other hand, because the government was always, for the 400 years, somebody foreign. We didn't have our own institutions. It was always somebody else. So from the first day in 1991, when Ukraine regained independence, we started building the new institutions from scratch without having expertise in that. That's why we had those ups and downs, you know. But I think, you know, after 2014, Ukraine has proven that we are very clear on our path, that our future is in Europe and in NATO, and that we will do everything possible to reform our country to get there. Now, it's not going to be easy because we are a democracy and because there are so many different stakeholders, and there are always going to be a healthy or sometimes very difficult discussions. But we're still moving in the right direction, and especially after we win, I think people who paid ultimate sacrifice for our independence during these 8 months, we owe it to them to make it right and to succeed.
What's it like working with President Volodymyr Zelensky?
Amazing. You know, I think the whole world is inspired by his bravery and strength and his communication skills and his sense of humor. And he's exactly like that. And I worked with him when I was the Minister of Finance before, from 2019, after he was elected, until 2021. And I have rediscovered him again since February 24th. He has been brave beyond even, you know, understanding when he made that decision that he is not only staying in Kyiv, but he will be there and he will fight with his own people. I think that decision has been the key decision in this fight. And over throughout all the difficult, you know, phases of this, he's leading by example.
If I really do have 3 minutes of your time still left, I'm going to go back and ask a question that I didn't ask when you talked about the Minsk agreement.
Yes.
You said in passing that Crimea is no different from any other part of Ukraine. But the history of Crimea and the Ukraine is it's an odd one. I mean, it was moved from Russia into Ukraine by the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev as a kind of birthday present to Ukraine. It was an odd thing. It was the 300th anniversary of the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. And it does seem, at least to this outsider, to be, its history is a little different. And it had been a place populated by lots of people who were deported from the peninsula by Stalin. So that is it really historically as much a part of Ukraine as the rest of Ukraine? And do you see it as a red line in Putin's eyes? That is, would the capture of Ukraine register differently with Russians than a battle for the Donbass?
Well, 3 points here. Point number one, in 1991, Ukraine voted for its independence in the borders that were internationally recognized borders, in which Ukraine became the co-founder of the UN, in which Ukraine was occupied by Soviet Union as the Soviet Ukrainian Republic, and Crimea was always part of that. And I have to also remind that 98% voted for independence, including the people of Crimea. So Crimea voted, wanted, and was independent together with Ukraine as the part of Ukraine since 1991. And according to all the standards and principles of the international law, Crimea is Ukraine. Yes. Now, history-wise, if you look at the history pre-Russian occupation in 1700s, when we lost at the Battle of Poltava, and if you look at the history of Crimean Khans who ruled in Crimea for very long time, and their alliances with Ukrainian state at a different stages, and with Ukrainian Cossacks, and that our common fight against the Moscow Kingdom, which actually was even created much later than either Kievan Rus or Crimean Khanate. You know, it's very clear that if anyone can say that they are temporary there, it's actually the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union. And third is the Crimean Tatars, the indigenous people of Crimea, who have been brutally persecuted by the Soviets, who also all voted. Not only they were able to come back finally after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they voted together with the Ukraine, and they fought, and they're fighting now in Crimea to go back to Ukraine. So what Russia did there in 2014 with the sham referendum is no different than the sham referendums they have done recently in Kherson and other oblasts. So from that standpoint, whether formally or culturally, or from the people's perspective, or from the voting results of the people, Crimea is Ukraine, and it will always be Ukraine.
Well, Ambassador Oksana Markarova, thank you very much. We're honored to be honoring you this evening, and thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you for that honor, and it was a pleasure talking to you.